Hello, and you're listening to Conquering Chaos and Mayhem. I'm today's moderator, Brett Glover, and it's my pleasure to introduce the host of Conquering Chaos and Mayhem, Daryl Cully. Daryl, how are you today?
I'm awesome, Brett. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Good to hear. We got a really interesting guest lined up for Conquering Chaos and Mayhem today. Author, lecturer, teacher, and expert in emergency management, Mr. Alain Normand. Alain, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Not a problem. Daryl, I'll throw it to you and enjoy what I'm sure will be a very interesting conversation.
Again, welcome, Alain. One of the cool things about Alain is he is known worldwide. I was, a quick story. I was on the phone with a client in Europe, and we were talking about different things that were going on in Canada. And we'd just done a major exercise for Brampton. And I was talking about that, and they were like, "Oh, you know Alain." Yes. So he's got a reputation that precedes him, just across Canada, but around the world for his expertise. And some of the really innovative things that you've done in the past. But today, we have the opportunity to talk about your most recent adventure.
Right.
So you've officially retired or semi-retired from the city of Brampton, but of course you're continuing in teaching and consulting, but you made an amazing trip to the Ukraine.
Yes, I did.
So,
yeah. So just to clarify, if you want, I retired from the city of Brampton as the emergency manager there for over 22 years. That happened about almost 2 years ago now. But I kept busy and all sorts of things, and I'm involved with a number of organizations. I'm a Red Cross volunteer as well. And I do consulting and teaching and so all sorts of things regularly. And one of the things I was doing some work with ADRA Canada. So ADRA stands for Adventist Development and Relief Agency, and they are a humanitarian aid organization affiliated to the Adventist Church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so I've been with them actually for quite a few years on a part-time basis, just here and there. Once in a while, they deployed me to places where they needed help. And then, of course, with the Ukraine situation, they needed people that had some expertise, and they called on me. What they needed was really somebody that had a lot of coordination and logistics support. The role that ADRA was playing in Ukraine was the in-kind donation management. Mostly in kind, but also some money, some financial, but mostly in kind. So they were receiving goods, mostly food, but also a few other things. They were getting from other countries around Ukraine. So you had Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, a few other, even Germany, Belgium were sending things. They were all sending truckloads of food, in particular, to Ukraine. And then the people in Ukraine was getting this food, and then they had to redistribute to all the places where they had people either in shelters, evacuated, or even people who were on the front line but couldn't leave for some reason. So they were not really prepared for that. They were a bit disorganized. They had a very small team. ADRA had a chapter in Ukraine, but it had about maybe 6 people. And this was, of course, a huge undertaking. There's no way 6 people could really do this. So ADRA has an international facet. And so the ADRA International called on the various countries to say, we need help in Ukraine. And so the Canadian chapter, which is actually located near Oshawa in Ontario, and they said, well, person that we've got, is Alain, are you available? And of course, that happened right not too long after my retirement. So I said, yeah, I'm there, but it's no problem. So they planned to deploy me. So the conflict in Ukraine started in February. and they scrambled, did what they could for a while, and I was called to go there, and in May of 2022, I went to I was sent there. And it's funny because they put me on standby a couple of weeks before that. They said, okay, hold on, we're going to get everything ready for you and we'll call you. And then they call me on a Friday afternoon and they say, we need you on the plane on Monday. Not a lot of time to get organized. Not only that, but I had to go, we were still in the COVID situation, so I had to go and get a COVID test because the airline wouldn't let me on if I didn't have a negative COVID test. So I had to scramble to get a clinic in Brampton to do the test and give me the results before I left. So it worked out. We got it, and I was on the plane on the Monday and off to Ukraine, and I stayed there for 6 weeks. And my mandate, if you want, was to help them organize a system to do this distribution of food and goods, because they were basically getting pallets full of pallet of rice, pallet of pasta, pallet of canned goods, whatever, and they were really not sure how to organize it and all that. So what we did is we brought in some volunteers and we started organizing meal plans. We had boxes, we got some boxes, and we had boxes where we filled and each box had the same kind of thing. And we had actually a nutritionist who had calculated what should be in those boxes in order for, we were aiming for meal plans for families of 4 for a week at a time. And so how much calories and what should you have in there? So we were based on what we, of course, for food that we were receiving, we planned the meal plans like that. So we got volunteers and we had a whole system to prepare the boxes. We put the boxes and that was what was going on the pallets that would go in the trucks to be delivered to the shelters or the what we call the hotspots. And so that was a big part of the program, was to get that structure. But not only that, but those donations, that food donation and the money to make it happen came from all sorts of different countries. And of course, it was great that the governments of all these countries were giving away money to buy food and to give. But there's an accountability. They wanted to know, where is that going? And at the time when they started all of it, there was really no way to know where everything was going. There was no paperwork. There's basically, they had a few delivery slips from the driver of the truck that said, this is what we're giving you. But where did it go after that? So one of the key things we had to do was to make sure that we were demonstrated that we're accountable, and we were able to determine exactly where everything we received, where it went. We had to show that this was not to be used by staff or volunteers or people or our friends. This went to the survivors from the conflict that they needed. So we had to set up a really very rigorous system to be able to track all that with inventories, delivery slips, and having double signatures on all the papers and all of that. So you can imagine, starting from scratch, really, because they had nothing. We had to set that up. Now, ADRA had already some of the systems, but we had to update them and adjust them for the situation there. And of course, we had then to translate. We had to, most of the stuff that ADRA had was in English, but we had to translate it in Ukrainian and Russian, because they use both languages depending on where they are. The people that are closer to the Russian border tend to speak more Russian. People that are further into the country speak more Ukrainian. So depending on who is going to work with this, we have to have all of these forms, these procedures, these protocols in both languages, in both Ukrainian and Russian. And we had it in English, of course, as well. So that was, the most of the work that I did during those 6 weeks was to do that and then to train the people. Because our goal was not to be there for the long term. Our goal was to help them set it up and then let the Ukrainian people on site continue the work and take it over and do it themselves. It's the old, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach him to fish, you feed him forever. So that was the principle. We weren't there to do the work for them. We were there to help them set up the system so that they could do the work going forward. And I'm proud to say that after 6 weeks when I left, we had a system organized, structured, the people were trained, they knew how to do it, and they were able to send reports on a regular basis. On a weekly basis, we get reports of everything, what we received, how it was managed, and where it went. So that really was my mandate. That's why it's more logistical aspect, not as sexy or attractive as some of the other work, but very important. So when ADRA got a lot of money actually from the Canadian government. The way, maybe I can also explain something. Most people don't know how it worked. Prime Minister Trudeau says we're going to give so many $1 million to Ukraine for the relief effort. And everybody thinks that Prime Minister Trudeau just signs a check and sends it out and that's it. But that's not the way it really works. The way it works is that agencies that do various kind of disaster relief work apply to the federal government to be able to do a project and have that project funded by the government using that money that was promised by Prime Minister. So ADRA applied for money from that fund in order to be able to provide the kinds of services that I just explained, in Ukraine. And the federal government, I think it was $12 million that ADRA got from the federal government to do this. And again, the auditors from the federal government, they want to see paperwork. They want to see, what did we do with that 12 million? And so it was important for us to show all of that. So we did, and we had very good systems, but then after that, of course, they needed people. They needed people with that expertise, and that's why I myself had the opportunity to go there. And I wasn't alone because we had actually a team. We were six of us. We had people from a person from Australia, one from New Zealand, one from Sri Lanka, one from the US. Forget, there was one other place. Oh, one from Germany, and then myself. So it was an international.
You guys kept very busy, in fact, weren't you?
Oh yeah, we were, absolutely. Well, because there was I was in charge of the logistics part, but there was other things as well. So they had, like I said, they had 6 staff. Well, you can't run an operation of that magnitude with 6 people. So they had to recruit.
Imagine you would. Daryl, have you ever worked with such a limited amount of staff in your time?
Well, when we're dealing with small remote First Nations, that's all you've got. Fortunately, when you're dealing with more urban areas, you've got resources to call upon. But getting people to volunteer to go to a war zone, that's a different issue, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
I did interrupt you guys there, Daryl. I imagine you had some questions. I apologize. Go ahead.
So Alain, what is the big need in Ukraine for the citizens at this moment?
I think they're doing better now because we're not the only agencies that was there. The Red Cross, World, all sorts of different organizations were there. World Fund, forget the green, the food grains was there. So there was a lot of organizations involved there. To the point that we actually had to sort of assign cities to each organization so that we weren't duplicating the work that we were doing. Also, every agency was assigned a certain number of cities, and that's where you're going to work with. And so we weren't stepping on each other. So there's a lot of things, and it's getting better. What I think we're getting into the stage now where what they're going to need is they're going to need a lot of trauma support, trauma counseling. So if there's organizations out there that have psychologists, people that are in counseling, we have a lot of our church pastors that are ready to help out in various ways. We do send teams of spiritual and emotional comfort, And this is a multi-denominational. So when we send somebody there, it's not to preach one religion or another. It's to provide the emotional support that they need. And even if they want spiritual support, we can give it, but we give it without any denominational criteria, if you want. It's
Right.
Whatever you believe, yeah.
You've got years of domestic experience here in Canada,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're thrown into a war zone, an ocean away. What were the skill sets that you had learned here that were most applicable there?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of what we do in disaster management, disaster and emergency management, is fairly similar. I mean, the food donations and the logistics aspect of that I've done here in Canada in all sorts of ways. In various situations, coordinating. So that wasn't new. What is that external? First, we were dealing with people who had so. We were hiring people to do this, and we were actually hiring people that were evacuated from war zones. So what happened now is that we had people who had already they were sort of traumatized a bit themselves and all that, but also they were doing it. How could I say? Volunteers generally want to help, and that's great, but they usually help a bit remotely. They're not necessarily directly affected themselves, so there's not an emotional tie as strong when they're doing the work of a volunteer. But here we were dealing with people. It was their own country, their own land, their own people that were being affected. So there was a strong emotional tie, and the people that were there to volunteer, they wanted to do this. They really cared for what was going to happen, and they were extremely grateful for the work that we were doing, that international team. We were coming from all over the world to support them, to help them. They were extremely grateful. So there's that. I think the main difference that I saw there is that emotional tie to the work that was being done, which I hadn't really encountered that before.
We use IMS, ICS here, Incident Command. Is that a system that is used in this area? Or what system was it?
So because ADRA ADRA is mostly US based, and we have a strong component in Canada. So because we are all using IMS in Canada, US, and so ADRA itself was using IMS, and I know some of the other agencies that were there are also using IMS. The Red Cross was there, and they're using it. So the agencies that were deployed there used it, and we trained the people that we were hiring and we were working with us in at least a basic IMS, understanding. But we had to adjust it because, of course, IMS has a basic structure for response, but then you have to play around with some of the positions and all that in order to make it fit the scenario that you're working with. So we did. So we had, if you want, we had a modified IMS structure. As a lot of the work was actually on logistics, a little bit on administration and finance. The planning itself, once the plan was developed, that was it. It wasn't something that was going to modify very much from day to day. And then the operation was really mostly to be able to deliver the trucks to the right locations and with the food on them. So it was not a huge amount. The interesting part of the operation actually is that we had to have extensive daily communication with the people in the hotspots. So when I'm talking hotspots, is all those areas where there was risk, there were conflicts, there were snipers, there were so the people, we were sending drivers in areas where we were actually putting them at risk. We actually equipped them with bulletproof vests, helmets. We had special trauma kits in case they get hurt, they get hit by a bullet. We had all sorts of things, very different mindset. When I go in a disaster zone, I don't expect to be shot at. But here, that was the expectation. So we had to make that. And then we had to be in communication. So not me, because I don't speak Ukrainian, but we had people who their role was to communicate daily with the people on the ground. So the mayors of those communities where we're going, the military agencies that were on site, just to be able to say, can we send a truck or not? And where do we send it and where do we position it? And then it was up to the mayor and or the people in the area to get the word out so that people could come and pick up the goods and then go back home. So a lot of communication aspect on that, in order to make sure that we weren't sending. And we actually had twice that we had to actually stop the trucks and say, we just got notice that there's snipers in that area. Stop, don't go, wait for instructions. And then they would be redirected. They were redirected to another location. And then the people on the ground knew that, well, okay, we've changed location, that we're going to wherever, point X for drop off. And we're doing
quite a challenge for people in need. Not only are they in need of food and power and water and all of the necessities of life, but when you go to give it to them, their lives as well as the lives of the people delivering it are at risk.
Exactly. That's where it's very different from most disasters. You go to a flood, where the flood zone is. Once the flood, the waters recede, now you can help people, but you know exactly where you're going, and it's going to be always the same place. And people aren't afraid to go there because it's a safe area. In a war zone, that doesn't apply. You have to be extremely flexible, because from day to day, the situation changed. The map was changing, constantly, So Russian forces were coming in, Ukrainian forces were pushing them back. So the map was being modified on a daily basis. We had to be very much aware of that. So very different from disaster zones. I've done tons of disaster zones, and rarely, in a forest fire, you might have to change your location here and there because the wind is going to change the direction of the fire. But typically, you set up and you're there for the duration.
People may be listening in from around the world, wanting to help.
Yeah.
How can they help? What is the best way that people can support the people who are being impacted and struggling in these situations?
Right. And so the quick answer is that the best help is always money, because transporting goods, is complex. You've got all sorts of verification. You've got food inspections, public health inspections. You've got customs inspections. You've got, so trying to send goods from outside. We had to go, the trucks that we were getting from Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Germany, they had to go through all sorts of inspections before they were able to go through the border to get into Ukraine. So even that, sometimes it took a couple of days to get a truck through, because you had to have all this paperwork. So, but money is easy to handle. It's easy to transfer, and it can go directly to pot. The other advantage with money is that if you give money to people, they will spend it inside that community where they live, or where they are. If they're evacuated, where they have been evacuated, they'll be able to spend that money right there, which means it's going to help the local economy. And right now, the local economy needs all the help it can get. They lost so much. A lot of businesses had to close. A lot of people were unemployed because of the conflict. So the more money that flows into the country and then stays around the country, the better it's going to help them to recover and get back on their feet. And this is not, right now, the conflict isn't over. Of course, it's still happening. But even after the conflict is over, they'll need that to be able to rebuild and restart and get going again. So money is the best.
So one of the things that comes up every single crisis, including local tornado we had in Barrie, is there are people out there, I hate to say it, scamming and trying to get their part of the money. How, if people want to donate, how do they ensure that it's going to an organization that is going to get those funds and the resources that are needed, and that it's legitimate?
Yeah. And so the answer is that you have to go through a recognized organization, an organization that you are sure has been. So there are a number of them out there. World Vision, for example, Save the Children. You have Red Cross, definitely. But so search for an organization that is recognized, that is not a fly by night kind of thing. That's it. I always say, don't use the GoFundMe. It's a nice idea and all that, but you don't know who's going to be at the other end and what they're going to do with that money. So I caution people not to go to the GoFundMe kind of situation, options. And I've heard over the years, people say, well, I'm not giving to the Red Cross because the Red Cross, they keep the money and there's a huge administrative fee. And the reality is that that's a myth. The reality is that the Red Cross has a total different stream of fundraising for the administration. When there is money given to go for a disaster, that money goes almost 100% to the survivors, the people that have been affected directly. And I can speak for ADRA, it's the same thing. We have a very strict. See, ADRA is, because it's a faith-based organization, it's actually the administrative costs are covered by donations from the members of the church. So all the members, we get appeals at the church, at the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We get appeals on a regular basis for money to go to ADRA. And that's what covers the administrative. So when we go into response into a disaster, there is no money, none of that money to be received, whether it's the government funding or it's private funding. There's none of that money that goes to cover the administration. All the money goes directly to the people affected. But again, this is because these are organizations that are structured, that are already there. They don't do just one disaster. They do all of them. Every time something happens. And so that's what I caution people to go for something that you're sure of, and I speak for ADRA, I speak for the Red Cross and all that, but there's others out there. There's all sorts of groups that are there that are very good, but make sure you check them. Go check their website, check their credentials before you're ready to give that money.
As emergency managers, we know it starts with the heart, right? That's why you get into the business to begin with. Yeah. So I'm sure you've got your go bag ready for the next incident and deployment. If someone is interested in doing an international deployment like this, or even a domestic deployment to a major event, give us very briefly what they should do to be prepared and to make themselves available for such a deployment.
Again, here, those agencies will want to send people that they know and that they have, they're sure that they're going to be useful. I've seen groups of people go up. I remember the Haiti earthquake, where people just picked up and left and went to Haiti and said, I want to help, and then arrived in Haiti wanting to help with actually no idea what they were going to do. And now they become a problem because, where do you lodge them? How do you feed them? Food, water, and all that. And in conditions which were actually, they were getting in danger because there's cholera outbreaks, and they were not vaccinated necessarily for those things. And so you don't want to go unless you're set officially. But the agencies that work on the ground will only send you if they are sure that you are the person that can do the work for them. That's what's needed. So it's not at the moment of an emergency that you have to go and offer help. It's way before. You have to go and register with an agency. Say, I want to be involved in your next disaster. Here's my skill set. They'll ask you all sorts of questions about, what kind of experience you have, what can you bring to the table, and and go through that process.
And there has to be appropriate training. And so
Exactly.
It's not just, hey, I'm going to jump on a flight and arrive there. And because, like you said, you can be more of a burden than you are a benefit. So,
exactly.
So join the organizations early.
Yeah.
Make your intent known and be prepared.
If we post some names of agencies and organizations currently working in Ukraine. Now, the other thing is that there's a lot of agencies that may not be as well known. One of the things I say to people, because I talk for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that's one faith-based organization. But there's a lot of different faith-based groups out there that have a disaster response role, and they have an organization which is affiliated to that church. You take the Mennonite Disaster Services. Well, that's the Mennonite church. You take World Renew, and that's the Pentecostal, I think. So you have different groups out there. So if you belong to a faith-based organization, or you attend, church, mosque, whatever, find out, are they doing anything? Do they have an agency affiliated with them? So, for example, the Sikh organization, Sikh community has Khalsa Aid. Khalsa Aid is a fantastic organization, and it's organized. It's done primarily through the Sikh community, and they do work all around the world as well. In the same way. And they're faith-based somewhat because they're affiliated with the Sikh religion, but they do fantastic work. So if you're a Sikh person and you don't feel comfortable going to a Christian organization, then look up, and the same goes for any other community, any other religious groups. Find out what's in your neck of the woods. That's the idea.
And Alain, you did amazing work for the city of Brampton in bringing faith groups of all types together to provide community support in the event of a disaster. And that program is an example that should be used by municipalities all over. So I would encourage any emergency managers on the municipal side, give the city of Brampton a call, their emergency management office, and ask, because Alain spent many years developing this program, and it's one of your legacies.
It is. We called it the Lighthouse Program. Basically, churches, mosques, temples, gurdwaras, whatever they were, became the lighthouse for an area in case of an emergency. We had negotiated agreements with all of these faith-based leaders that they would open their doors in an emergency for people in the neighborhood to come in, regardless of the religion. Had nothing to do with religion. It had to be the fact that they had a building, facility, and they could provide shelter and care for the people there. And they were connected with us so that they'd have communication on a regular basis about what was going on with the situation, whatever incident they were dealing with. So, and we did that. We actually did a couple of open door events because we felt that there was a bit of a stigma. If you're a Christian and you've never been in a Muslim temple, how are you going to feel about going into there when there's a disaster? So what we did is we organized some open doors so that people could go in and see what is a Muslim temple if you're a Christian, or vice versa. What's in a church, a Catholic church if you're a Muslim, or a Sikh and all that. So we organized that. We had people from those neighborhoods invited to come and take a look, come and meet us, come and talk to us. And we did get a lot of good feedback on that because it really broke down some of those barriers that they're subconscious, but they're there.
It's all about people serving people.
That's what it is. Yeah.
So thank you, Alain. Our time has come to an end. We look forward to hearing about your next adventure. I would love to have you back. But thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and joining us and sharing about your adventures in the Ukraine. Thank you to our listeners, and thank you to Brett. And we look forward to having you join us on our next podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And on behalf of our host, Daryl Colley, I am Brett Glover for Conquering Chaos and Mayhem. Thanks, everybody, for listening.